Truth is never late. It simply waits for the audience to get quiet enough to hear Mine arrived on a Tuesday morning at 9:42 a.m., broadcast to half the city before I even had my second cup of coffee. For 35 years, the morning news had opened with the same name, Daniel Carter. For 25 of those, I'd been the woman waiting at home. Journalist turned editor, once his equal, now the person who corrected captions behind the scenes. I used to believe our roles were complementary. He spoke for a living. I carved silence into words that lasted. Turns out, I didn't know what he was saying when the cameras stopped. That morning, his network was airing a charity segment. I had the TV on low while editing freelance columns. Just background noise until I heard laughter that wasn't part of the script. A technical mishap, an open microphone, and Daniel's voice rang too clearly. She still thinks I come home for dinner, Sophie. You'll have to help me break the news, kindly. Sophie Lane, the younger co-anchor with hair like neon promises. 32, maybe 33. Always deferential on camera. Her voice giggled back. Faint but undeniable. Don't worry, Danny, I can be very gentle. Producers cut the feed. The show stumbled into commercials. I sat there, half smiling at my own disbelief. Then the phone started vibrating. Colleagues, friends. The kind of pity calls people make when they aren't sure whether to offer condolences or headlines. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I poured the coffee I didn't want and watched the steam slither upward until it vanished. When you've lived with a journalist long enough, you know how public and private truths diverge. What you don't expect is to suddenly become the story. 2 hours later, Daniel called from the studio. Darling, something crazy happened with the mics. I heard, I said. It was nothing joke between friends. Between colleagues, I corrected. He paused. The pause was longer than honesty usually needs. Can we talk when I get home? By habit, you mean? I asked, because according to Sophie, the home schedule has changed. He swallowed audibly through the line. Please don't do anything rash. I'm a writer, Daniel, I said. Our actions are measured in edits. Then I hung up. Not out of rage, but to save the recording in its perfect final sentence. By sunset, entertainment sites had run the clip. The comments were predictable. Age gap love. Poor wife. Power couple coming soon? I closed every tab one by one as if burying tiny corpses named privacy. I didn't cry. Good editors don't waste ink on first drafts of pain. That night, I wrote a single line in my journal. He left me live on air. I will reply in print. Then I made chamomile tea, opened my email, and typed a message to my old friend Mara Lewis, investigative podcaster, truth enthusiast, keeper of affection sharpened by sarcasm. Subject: story idea body. What's the market rate for irony these days? Her reply came within minutes. Depends. Are you selling it or publishing it? When Daniel finally walked through the door close to midnight, he looked like a man who'd spent the evening rehearsing sympathy. Isabel, please. You of all people understand headlines get twisted. That depends, I said flatly. Which headline should I untwist first? He tugged at his tie like truth was strangling him. I made a mistake. I didn't want you to find out like this. Every story finds its reader eventually, I said. He didn't get it. He'd forgotten I was still a woman of words. When he went upstairs, I looked around our living room. The framed awards and smiling publicity photos on the walls. The shelves lined with books signed to Daniel and Isabel. Media's golden pair. How beautifully. Fiction ages. I took one frame down and turned it face down on the mantel. Then I whispered to the silent house as much to myself as to him. Tomorrow will begin the real reporting. Morning headlines are amusing when they're not about you. When they are, the sound of a newspaper hitting the porch feels like a slap composed in punctuation. For 3 days, reporters circled my life like flies around spoiled fruit. Someone photographed me buying groceries. Another quoted a source close to the couple. Apparently, that source was my mailman. I answered no calls, gave no statements. People mistake silence for submission, but an editor knows it's simply the pause before a rewrite. I stayed in our house correction, Daniel's house. Ownership had shifted in spirit, if not paperwork. Most of the time he was gone, performing damage control with his younger co-anchor. He'd text at odd hours. Don't read the comments. If you really knew me, he'd have texted, file them. Because that's what I did, screen captures, transcripts, every word. The journalist inside me was finally stretching after decades of domestic hibernation. Each new article or public statement from him went into a digital folder titled Revision. Mara called twice a day. Are you eating or just compiling evidence? Both, I said. One feeds the body. The other feeds the soul. She laughed, that low laugh that means sympathy disguised as respect. Keep receipts, Izzy. Truth costs too. One afternoon, the network released an official statement. Anchor Isabel Carter has expressed regret for the misunderstanding during last week's broadcast. We value integrity and privacy for all involved. I stared at the word misunderstanding. It's the Switzerland of apologies, neutral, uninhabitable. I printed the statement, highlighted it, and wrote in the margin. Misunderstanding equals when lies get diplomatic passports. By the 4th day, I developed a ritual. Wake up, brew coffee, open Daniel's program online, turn off sound, and watch his mouth move. When you mute a liar, the truth plays in caption. He talked about trust, community, transparency, every virtue he had recently misplaced. I took notes anyway. A good editor never wastes content. People kept asking what I'd do next. Mara wanted me on her podcast to tell my story my way. I said not yet. You don't broadcast truth half-edited. I needed to decide if I wanted to hurt him or help the truth. One can't always do both. So I stayed still. Stillness is truth's incubator. I wrote in my journal, silence isn't absence. It's a press credential for the soul. Daniel came home on Friday night, looking like regret in a tailored suit. He stood in the doorway, tie loosened, voice rehearsed. People are cruel, Isabel. They're twisting everything and trying to protect you by lying better than them. I asked. He flinched. I never wanted this to go public. Public has always been your preferred address, I said. Then I held up my phone. Smile for history. I'm recording the truth now. He stared at me, baffled. What is this for? For reference, I said. I used to edit your sentences. Now I just archive them. He muttered something about cruelty and left again. The door clicking shut sounded like proofread finality. Without him, the house breathed more evenly. I rearranged my office, dusted an old typewriter George from production had gifted me when the newsroom went digital. The keys still worked, each clack a heartbeat from the past. I typed the words I've been circling around all week. He left me for a younger woman. I left him the version of himself he feared most, the honest one. Then I added a subtitle beneath it. Part I. Draft for internal use. It wasn't anger. It was editing. And for the first time in months, the cursor blinking on the screen looked less like a threat and more like a pulse stop by Sunday. Mara emailed again. When you're ready to go on record, I have the microphones. All you'll need is closure. I replied, working on it. Truth needs fact-checking. Then I made tea, turned off my phone, and enjoyed the sound of my own name not being public property. People always assume truth throws tantrums, not it doesn't. It organizes. Once the panic of public humiliation subsided, my days began acquiring structure again. Coffee, headlines, editing assignments, silence, more silence, planning. The to-do list of recovery. Daniel filled magazines. I filled folders. The first step was purely professional. I called an old colleague at the Chronicle's archives section. I need guidance on privacy laws, I said lightly. Purely hypothetical. She chuckled. With you? Nothing's hypothetical. She sent me links, statutes, precedents. Bedtime reading for revenge done legally. The second step was personal inventory. I gathered every document that proved how long I'd been the shadow behind his shine. Proof of ghost-written speeches, edited articles, tax filings showing shared royalties. I had receipts for the fame he believed was self-made. A museum could have opened an exhibit titled Evidentiary Marriage. I stored everything on a password-protected drive labeled recipes. No hacker suspects passed her instructions. Mara dropped by one afternoon, finding my dining table covered with files. Isabel, this is obsession. No, I said. This is curation. She laughed. What's the endgame? Freedom with footnotes, I replied. I won't fight him with rumors. I'll fight him with accuracy. She tilted her head. Then turn it into something publishable. But promise me you'll choose truth over spite. I intend to make them identical, I said. At night. I'd sometimes catch Daniel's broadcast, muted as always. Public amnesia is swift. His ratings had already stabilized. Someone had rebranded him as resilient, a word that tastes noble only when applied to victims, not perpetrators. He looked older nevertheless. Vanity and deceit both corrode the jawline in similar ways. One evening, during a particularly saccharine segment thanking his viewers for standing by him, he looked straight into the camera and said, "I'll never stop fighting for truth." I laughed so hard I spilled my tea. Finally, a shared mission. I started organizing my notes into a long-form essay, a personal narrative on how truth dies in comfortable homes. No names yet, just patterns. How celebrity sanitizes scene. How audiences prefer a handsome liar to an aging truth. Before publishing, I wanted legal clarity. I met Grant Moore, an attorney recommended by Mara. He listened quietly as I explained the story. When I finished, he removed his glasses and said, "You're sitting on a career-ending expose. Release it, and he'll lose everything." "I don't want to ruin him," I said. "I want to complete him. Perfect the image with truth's final layer." He smiled. "Poetic, ethically clean, legally sound. I'll draft you a non-gossip disclaimer." He confessed he'd never represented someone trying to save face for the other party. Meanwhile, I moved out of Daniel's house into a small apartment above a bookshop. My new landlady, a witty widow named June, asked what I did for a living. "I edit truth," I said. She nodded approvingly. "Good field. Demand never drops." The first night alone there, I felt both broken and intact, like a vase reassembled with gold in the cracks. Japanese call it kintsugi. Editors call it revision. Daniel tried reaching me a few times. First calls, then texts, always voiced with carefully crafted remorse. He even sent flowers through the network courier service. I signed for them politely, removed the note, and donated the bouquet to the bookshop's window display. At least it could pretend to adorn honesty. He eventually showed up at my office. Same charisma. A new ring indent on his finger. "Aren't we past this is?" he asked. "People forget. We could start over. Right now they've forgotten what happened," I said. "That they haven't learned why. That's what bothers me. Then I thanked him for the flowers and closed the door with editorial finality. That night, I sat at my desk and outlined what Grant called the truth package. An essay, summaries of documents, attachments redacted for privacy. My finger hovered over the title bar, and I typed, The Unedited Man. Subheadline, a true story about how I confused loyalty for silence, and how truth forgave neither of us. I saved the file, backed it up twice, and whispered to the screen. Tomorrow we begin fact-checking fear. Freedom sounds nothing like bells. It sounds like keyboard clicks at 3 a.m, and the hiss of a kettle that waits silently when you forget it's boiling. Submitted the essay to Veritas Quarterly under a pseudonym, E.L. Rowan, the gender-neutral combination of our initials. Mara helped edit the tone, sanding away personal bitterness until all that remained was structure. First-person truth disguised as case study. My instinct wanted poetry. The journalist in me demanded evidence. Balance achieved. The editor emailed 3 days later. Powerful, meticulous, impossible to fact-check, but impossible to ignore. We'd like to publish it next issue. They titled it, The Unedited Man. I didn't argue. When the issue went live, the public devoured it. It trended among journalists, activists, even academics dissecting the ethics of self-erasure. The irony amused me. Daniel Carter, national face of integrity, was quoted in half the essays as a theoretical example. No one said his name, but everyone knew the silhouette. Within a week, I received 52 emails from women, producers, co-hosts, wives, all thanking E.L. Rowan for saying what they couldn't. Turns out, truth had been waiting for company. Mara left a voicemail that simply said, You did it, Izzy. You built a cathedral out of evidence. I did not celebrate with champagne. I bought a new teapot. Champagne bubbles vanished too fast. Truth likes its victories simmered. At home, I watched traffic from my balcony. Headlights flowing like data streams. Somewhere in those cars, likely, someone was listening to Daniel's show. He was still on air, but the tone had changed. His segment on personal integrity in media was cancelled for budget reasons. That's how networks say karma without using religion. A month later, Veritas sent a royalty check. I barely glanced at the amount, donated it to an organization funding young investigative journalists. Money wasn't my profit. Silence was. The kind you can sleep in. The bookshop downstairs began hosting weekly salons on truth in storytelling. June, my landlady, turned them into mini events. One evening, a group discussed my article without realizing its author lived upstairs. Listening to strangers analyze your pain is a strange brand of therapy. Expensive but effective. Daniel contacted me again through Grant Moore, my lawyer. A short letter, equal parts accusation and plea. You have made me a metaphor, he wrote. Please, at least correct the context. I replied once. Metaphors are earned through behavior, not editing. Context belongs to truth now. The younger co-host, Sophie Lane, announced a leave of absence shortly after. Her public statement read, With growth comes accountability. I'd like to believe she finally met herself in a mirror, not flanked by studio lights. Daniel kept broadcasting for another 2 months before audiences moved on to fresher controversies. TV is a goldfish bowl of attention spans. Eventually his show was quietly retired. A new anchor took his seat, balanced, earnest, young enough to remind him of his mistakes. Mara came over one afternoon with coffee and a proposal. Publish the collection, she said. Turn this into a book. Articles, notes, personal essays on truth and media. Wouldn't that be profiting off pain? I asked. It's called curriculum, she said. Students need it. By summer, The Unedited Man and Other Truths was in print. Soft grey cover. Simple font. Inside the dedication page. For those who confuse silence with weakness. Consider this proof of volume. Reviews were kind. One critic wrote, "It feels less like vengeance and more like a public service." Another called it a manual for ethical survival. I preferred the email from a young reporter that simply said, "Thank you for showing that truth can be gentle and still climb walls." Grant Moore phoned to say that Daniel was suing no one. He knows he'd lose. Grant said, "Also, you left him nothing to disprove, only himself." That sentence became my bookmark for peace. Sometimes I still tune into late-night radio. When anonymous callers rant about betrayal, I want to tell them, write it down. Grammar is the noblest revenge. But I don't. Healing has its own SEO. It spreads without promotion. He showed up on a Wednesday, the same way winter does, slowly, then all at once. I opened my apartment door to find Daniel standing there, hat in hand, posture rehearsed for sympathy. The famous face had shrunk to fit a smaller life. "Hello, Isabel," he said. No stage voice, no camera polish. Just my name spoken like someone trying to remember what home used to sound like. "Come in," I said. The journalist in me never refuses a quote. He looked around the one-bedroom space. "You live above a bookshop. Truth always sells better upstairs." He smiled without humor. "People whisper I've lost everything. They exaggerate," I said. "You still have a microphone." "Not for long. They're reformatting the network." He sat opposite me. "I didn't come for pity. I came for closure." "Closure?" "Yes. Everyone thinks you wrote that piece to destroy me." "I wrote it so no one else would ever have to," I said. Destruction was a side effect. He rubbed at his ringless finger. "You made me a lesson. You gave me the curriculum." "That's cruel." "That's accurate." The room filled with the kind of silence that asks if forgiveness charges tuition. He sighed. "I wanted you to know I'm writing a book too. A memoir. My side. And what side will that be, north or fiction?" I asked. He winced. "I deserve that. You deserve a good editor." He looked up, eyes sharpened with old admiration. "I was hoping that could be you." I blinked. He wasn't joking. The man who'd made me an unwitting headline wanted me to polish his confession. "You want the truth edited again?" I asked. "That's how we got here." "No," he said softly. "I want it understood." I poured tea while considering the sins and virtues of professional mercy. He'd spent decades scripting reality. Maybe finally he needed someone to transcribe it honestly. "What if I help you?" I said. "But you don't touch my words. No additions, no cut lines, no spin." He hesitated, then nodded. "Deal. Then send me 3 chapters. I reserve the right to reject insincerity without notice." He half laughed. "I miss your deadlines. I miss when you met them," I said. A week later, his draft arrived by email. Subject line: "For your eyes only." I read every page, interview transcripts, half-truths, redemptive narrative arcs. It was a performer's apology, not a penitence. I returned it with track changes, lit like Christmas lights. At the end, added one note: "Readers don't forgive actors for forgetting their lines. They forgive humans for owning them." He responded with a single sentence: "Teach me how." We met weekly after that in the bookshop cafe downstairs. He'd bring revisions. I brought boundaries. Slowly his prose lost its anchor's posture and found something quieter, meaningful pauses. Occasional shame. The younger woman was gone from his life. Public interest gone with her. There was just Daniel Carter, learning to speak without a camera. Mara teased. Careful, you're rehabilitating the enemy. No, I said. I'm proofreading his mortality. Months passed. His book was eventually published digitally, small print run, moderate reviews. Critics called it earnest, which is publishing's word for safe. I didn't mind. He'd finally met truth halfway. That was the best co-authorship we could manage. One evening as we closed the cafe, he said, I hope you find someone who loves your truth as much as you do. I smiled. I already do. She lives here. I tapped my chest. He nodded quietly. And for the first time since the open microphone, we were both off the record. He left the city a month later, invited to teach media ethics at a small college in Oregon. The poetic mercy wasn't lost on either of us. I sent one final email. May your students forgive you faster than headlines do. No reply was necessary. Some stories end best in silence. If vengeance is noise, justice is good acoustics. It lets the right words echo. Months passed after Daniel left for Oregon. The city forgot the scandal, replaced me with fresher tragedies. That's how survival works here. Novelty is the first aid kit. I didn't mind being forgotten. Anonymity finally fit like a well-tailored coat. Then one morning, Mara stormed into the cafe below my apartment waving her phone. You've been shortlisted for the Fair Media Award, she said. The board picked you for the unedited man. That's ironic, I told her. Truth apparently loves trophies. She rolled her eyes. You're going, Izzy. They called you a pioneer in ethical narrative. Ethical? Me? I weaponized honesty. That's precisely why they need you. The award ceremony was modest. No red carpet, just polished wood floors and a room full of skeptical journalists. When they announced my name, I walked up slowly, already rehearsing an acceptance that sounded less like victory and more like punctuation. Truth, I said into the microphone, isn't a sword. It's a mirror. And sometimes when you hold it up, the light looks violent. But what it reflects is never revenge. It's recognition. Applause, quiet but real. I spotted a few familiar faces recording. The betrayal had matured into bibliography. Afterward, a young reporter approached me. Mrs. Carter, may I quote you? I'm writing about women exposing media hypocrisy. Quote me, I replied. Just spell humility correctly. It's disappearing from style books. Back home, I placed the award on my desk beside Grant Moore's letter, closing out the copyright filings. He'd included a small note in his tidy handwriting. Justice served politely ages the best. I smiled. He was right. Politeness is underestimated armor. In May, Veritas Quarterly sent an idea for a monthly column. Ethical short essays written in the same tone as my book. I accepted. They titled the column Margin Notes. The subtitle read, Edited by Isabel Carter, Where Truth Finds Its Footnotes. The first issue covered whistleblower fatigue. The second, fake forgiveness. The third was simply called Peace. Readers said it made them weep. Mara called it revenge therapy for the literate. Meanwhile, an envelope arrived from Oregon. Inside, a photograph of Daniel standing with his students in a small media ethics classroom. On the back he'd written, Your edits worked. No signature. None needed. I placed it between the pages of my journal under the entry that began everything. The book closed easily now, like a wound joined neatly without scar tissue. At the next bookshop salon, a journalism major named Leah asked, Do you still believe in marriage after all you've learned? I believe in collaboration, I said. Just edit the contract often. She laughed, eyes bright. You make truth sound forgiving. It forgives when it's understood, I said. Otherwise it just waits. Sometimes that's the only moral worth teaching. June, my landlady, started closing the shop early so we could drink tea on the balcony. She'd say, you make quiet feel fashionable. It always was, I answered. We just needed better lighting. Later that month, I was invited to guest lecture at the University of Columbia, my old campus. Topic: Truth without trauma. Standing in front of students half my age, I realized how complete the circle was. How betrayal had become curriculum. During Q&A, one asked, "Would you do it again?" I paused, then said, "Every truth costs something, but it's the only currency that doesn't inflate." They clapped like they'd just been told hope was real. Maybe it is. That evening, back in my apartment, I opened my graying journal one last time and wrote, "Justice doesn't shout. It simply waits until you can hear your own heartbeat without flinching." I closed the book, set the award on top, and made tea. The city lights entered through the curtains like forgiveness finally finding a window. Autumn always smells of edits. Air crisp, noises underlined, sun appearing in measured paragraphs across the skyline. I still live above the bookshop. Nothing grand has changed, which is its own luxury. Every morning I make 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for truth. The second always stays warm longer. Mara calls weekly from whatever city she's chasing scandals in. She ends every conversation with, "Keep telling stories is." I always say. They just start smaller now. Kind of miracles with citations. The bookstore hosts Sunday readings from young writers. They bring drafts about protests, identity, love in headlines. I listen, edit gently, hand back their pages with small pencil notes. Clearer here. Let silence do more work. Teaching feels like reclamation. I once taught a nation to believe the wrong man. Now, I teach a handful of students to believe in truth instead. Sometimes people still ask what happened to Daniel. I tell them he's fine. Because he is. He sends an occasional postcard from Oregon. A photo of the coastline, a quote from Plato, once even a drawing by one of his students. I write back exactly 3 words: keep teaching truth. Closure doesn't need more ink than that. My collection margin notes still runs, though I now sign it with my full name. Readers wrote to say it comforts them. That integrity sounds softer in my voice. One woman admitted she plays recordings of my lectures before bed. I understand. Some people fall asleep to music, others to proof that the world still makes sense. Grant Moore retired last month and invited me to his farewell party. He introduced me as the only client who paid in syntax. I told him syntax is just law with better style. He laughed until his eyes watered. Laughter always finds its way back to me through people not practicing it for television. The bookshop has a new assistant, Leah, one of my former students. She's bright, fearlessly curious. We argued good-naturedly about grammar and truth like 2 generations, sharing a language they'll never finish translating. When she locks up at night, she shouts up from the street, "Good night, Mrs. Carter. Keep writing." I always answer, "Good night, Miss Leah. Keep questioning." As for me, I've stopped writing about betrayal. Not because it wasn't important, but because it no longer needs defending. The truth I released found its own afterlife. It doesn't require my supervision. That's the simplest form of grace I know. Letting light take care of itself. Sometimes at night, I sit by the window and recognize my younger self in the reflection. Tired eyes, steady posture. I touch the glass and say, "You did it. You cleaned the record." Across the street, neon signs blink on and off, like a city nodding in agreement. I write one last entry in my journal. Truth was never his enemy. It was mine, until it became my only friend. And friends don't need forgiveness. They just need time. I close the book softly and whisper, "This one's for you, Daniel. and for who we became after we stopped pretending. Then I switch off the lamp and breathe the quietest sentence of my life. I'm at peace. If this story touched your heart, follow and subscribe to Kindred Echo, where every heartbreak finds its voice and every lesson blooms again.